Hello everyone! Today we're going to be working with circles, which is a shape, and we're going to be transforming them into spheres, which is a form. Okay, so we're going to be using value to turn shapes into forms. And there are different techniques. There's hatching, cross-hatching, and then the blended or blending method. Okay, so just like we did our value scales last week, we are going to be doing forms with using value. Each day we are going to be doing a different form this week. We are going to be using a different method as well. With today, we are going to start with the blended method. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. Okay, and I'm on the last one, the blended method. Before we start applying our values, remember value is determined based on our light source. Okay, so my light source I'm going to have coming from the top left. You can also draw like a little childish cartoon sun, okay, like your little kindergarten suns to show where your light source is coming from. Then when you shade, you're going to shade following the curve of your sphere, okay? Let me just draw a little circle over here on the side. When you shade, you do not shade going across, okay, because that makes it look flat. It does not look round like an actual sphere or ball. Okay, so this is wrong. When you shade, you want to shade in this direction. Okay, you can even draw little arrows. That's if your light source is coming from that way. If your light source is coming from the right, then you would shade in this directionality. Okay, with your cast shadow coming off that way, and then for this one, your cast shadow comes off on the other side. Okay, so back to our actual sphere. So since we know that our light source is coming from the top left, our cast shadow is going to go off to the right. Okay, your cast shadow still takes the shape of your form, okay, but more elongated. Okay, so it looks a little bit more ovally, but it still has that round shape of a circle. Okay, so now we're going to start shading this. And like I said, you shade in that curved. Okay, also maybe you can draw that little diagram next to you so you can keep that in mind while you're shading. But your highlight, remember, if you also use that worksheet that we went over on Friday, I labeled where each of your 5 elements go. And your highlight is right here. This will be pure white, then it'll go to a mid-gray and then darker. So I'm just gonna start applying my values. And when you're adding your values, so this is the blended method. So we're keeping our pencil strokes nice and close together. Okay, it's darker down in here. So you know that you can put more pressure like I am right now. But as you work your way closer to your light source, it does need to be a lot lighter, so a lot less pencil pressure. Remember, mechanical pencils, you'll be there all day. They end up looking a little scribbly because of how thin and small they are. With a regular pencil like this, you can get smoother mark makings. Like, look at how smooth that's starting to look. Okay, and you can smooth it out more with a tissue or a Q-tip as we're working. Okay, so now I'm gonna start building up the values. As I continue drawing, I am still following the directionality, and I'm starting in the darkest area because it's easier to apply more pressure. And As you go up, though, remember, you still want to draw light until it's right. Gradually build up those values. I'm doing this, like I said, in the darkest areas first, because in the darkest areas, it's a little more forgiving, because you know it has to be built up a lot with pencil, but towards the highlight it has to be a lot lighter. So you can use like a blending tool or your finger to help build up those values. But right now I'm just slowly using my pencil to start building it up. And I'm going in multiple directions, okay? You don't have to only use one direction to apply your value. You can also like color in circles, okay? But still make sure they're very close together, so eventually we achieve that gradual buildup of value. You'll notice too while I'm shading that some areas are looking a little spotty, so I need to make sure that I'm going back in there and making sure that it blends nice and smooth. Once again, we have that gradual buildup. I'm using my finger a little bit to spread around my values, still trying to show that directionality again. Okay, still gradually building up my values. You really want to make sure that it doesn't look stripy at all. Okay, so as you're working, make sure it doesn't go like harshly from dark to middle to light. It needs to have that gradual fade. You're showing that gradual change in tones from light to dark, just like when we did with our value scales. Okay, so see how I'm building that up. It doesn't have to happen so fast. I'm building it up gradually. Okay, you can see now that I'm starting to apply lighter pressure, and I'm trying to get that to fade into my darker values to help it fade nicely where it doesn't look stripy. See how I'm gradually overlapping it, and I'm applying more pressure lower and less pressure higher up to show that gradual fade. As you continue watching, you'll see that I continue to do this for the rest of the sphere. As you just saw a few times, I still went in and I smoothened out all of my values with my finger. Once again, you can use a Q-tip or a blending tool. If you're using your finger, make sure it's clean and there's no oils. Otherwise, the oil, you'll see like a fingerprint from the oils, and you don't want to get that on your paper. Okay, so I'm just going to continue building up my values. As you work your way down, I'll talk more about this as we get it closer, but the darkness still goes, like it fades down almost all the way towards the bottom of your sphere, except when you do get to the bottom, there is going to be a little bit of a reflected light. And as I continue drawing, you'll see how I begin to achieve that. Now that I'm getting really close to the bottom, I actually cover the entire bottom part of the sphere with a lighter gray. Okay, so I go in, I bring the dark value really close to the bottom, but then I go in and I color the rest of the bottom of the sphere like a light gray, because your reflected light is a little bit lighter than your mid value, but not as light as your highlight. And it should gradually blend in. It shouldn't go like dark to bright white right away, okay? You can go back in with an eraser and then go in and smoothen it out with your pencil if you ended up making it too dark, but it shouldn't just be your eraser. There should be a little bit of value on there as well. Now you see me going in, just doing some final touch-ups, anything that I think needs to be built up a little bit more. I'm going in, smoothing out any more areas that I think need to have some more work. Okay, and in just a moment, I'll show you how to add value to your cast shadows. So because our cast shadows are the darkest part of the 5 elements of shading, when you are applying your value, this is where you don't have to worry about drawing light until it's right. As long as you have your shape outlined for your cast shadow, you can start going in and coloring as hard as you can. Though as you work your way away from the sphere, you want to get a little bit lighter, not too light though. Just maybe about your core shadow to a little tiny bit lighter, but no lighter than that as you get away from the sphere. So it's really, really dark. Put as much pressure as you can when you're shading right next to your sphere. And then as you get away, you'll notice that I made it just a little tiny bit lighter as it got farther away. And I'll point out so you can see that. So here's where you notice it is a little bit lighter, the farthest away from my sphere, but I am going over it because I do want it to be a little bit darker than that. It's not as dark as it is close to the sphere, but it is still really, really dark. Also, look at that area between the sphere and your cast shadow. That reflected light against the cast shadow creates very nice contrast. Contrast, again, is that dark against light, light against dark. So here are the 5 elements of shading in practice. Once again, you have your highlight, your mid or half values or tones. You have your core shadow, your reflected light, and your cast shadow. Okay, so just to go through them again, your highlight is where the light source directly hits the sphere. Your mid and half values is that transition, those lighter values in between your highlight all the way to your darkest area, which is your core shadow. And then your reflected light is where the light source hits the table, bounces off, and reflects onto the bottom of your form. And then your cast shadow is your shadow cast away the opposite side from where your light source is coming from. The reflected light also shows nice contrast between the two. Okay, and remember, contrast are opposites, light against dark. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions tomorrow.